And just like crap, it's back. Carrie and the girls who can still stand to be around her are off to the Met Gala this week because apparently they'll let anyone in these days. Pull up a stool for your purse, drop a like and subscribe, and let's get into it. I'm gonna be honest with you. We're already scraping the bottom of the barrel for storylines this season. Say what you want about Sex and the City, but at least most episodes had some sort of coherent point. This bollocks just meanders. At podcast producer and current penis provider Franklin's encouragement, Carrie tries poaching some eggs. This is part of a brief effort to revisit some of the skills she never bothered to learn in her 30s. Based on what she did in last season's premiere, I would have suggested a first aid course, but we are where we are. Don't you worry about her developing too much though, because she has to use her laptop to set a 3-minute timer, instead of on her phone, like a normal person. Carrie later reveals to Charlotte that her arrangement with Franklin is strictly casual. Their once-per-week orgie de tristesse only extends as far as watching a cookery show and then having him check her internal temperature with his meat thermometer. Franklin, who scores a 9 for looks but a -1000 for common sense, does try to move their relationship forward with an invite to a rooftop bourbon launch, but Carrie turns him down. They both seem to take it well, but this is Carrie Bradshaw we're talking about. A man showing emotional vulnerability within 10 blocks of her might as well be revealing that he has tentacles instead of nipples. Expect it not to last. There's no time to dwell on that though, because Carrie and co are off to the Met Gala. For some absolutely bizarre reason, she trusts ex-podcast co-host Jackie's wife Smoke to make her dress for the occasion. And nothing speaks more to a designer's glamour credentials than them showing up to your apartment wearing a fisherman's net they found down at the docks. Smoke's contribution to this year's theme, Veiled Beauty, looks like a bedspread I once owned, and includes a cape. But no veil. Maybe she got her name after being trapped in a house fire for just too long as a child. The outfit is, accordingly, an unfinished disaster. Instead, Carrie whips out her old wedding dress and teams it with Smoke's cape, because I guess Big Stench had to be on this somewhere. She makes an offhand comment about how she's repurposing her pain, but we don't get long to dwell on that before one of the jump scare cuts which the editors of this series seem to consider their trademark. And the cape just so happens to be a perfect colour match for the headpiece she wore to her not wedding 15 years earlier. They aren't even trying anymore. Miranda, who last season moved to California with new partner Che, tries to improve herself this week, which lasts literally minutes before she's flopping out of a sensory deprivation tank stark bollock naked like someone just ejected her from the Matrix. Elsewhere, Che's super relatable drama is that the costume department of their TV pilot wants them to wear a sparkly blazer. They say it screams,
"Hey America, I'm non-binary!"
But to me, it screams, "Hi, I found this in Jimmy Savile's bin." To make matters even more mid, writer BD, who themselves dresses like someone doing ropey Joker cosplay at an off-brand Comic-Con, wants them to have matching blue hair streaks. Because apparently it's the 90s again. However, costumes are the least of Che's concerns. Because based on the brief snippet of their Comedy Store set we see, the only TV show I'd be recruiting them for is Squid Game. Not that their peers fare much better, with the evening's host asking,
"Out here in LA filming their TV pilot? Hey Che, any part for a white guy?"
Which is also a joke, apparently. I think I've had funnier experiences sitting on my own balls. We're then treated to a deeply, deeply upsetting and punishingly long scene where Miranda tries to strap herself into some complicated looking bedroom apparatus at Che's insistence. It seems the writers heard that people thought season 1 was light on sexy times, and so have decided to teach us a lesson by inflicting as much of it on us as they can get away with. Lucky us. Mercifully, it's all cut short by Miranda getting the wrong end of the stick and convincing herself that their relationship is only about sex. I can't imagine what gave her that impression. Maybe the fact that the only thing we've seen that they have in common is a shared interest in each other's blowholes. Che is forced to reveal that the issue is actually body image, since their TV show has put them on a diet at the earlier wardrobe fitting. Which is rich, considering who else was in the room at the time, but I digress. After a bit of ego stroking from Miranda, Che throws caution to the wind and their face into a pizza. Which, in terms of fragile mentality, puts them about on the same level as appeasing a 5-year-old with a trip to Chuck E. Cheese. Feels right to me. This week in Who Gives a Shit news, Lisa's busy. And she makes documentaries. Did you know? Did you? You should, because the show's made it her one and only personality trait. Well, that and her highly scheduled attitude towards cunnilingus. Seema discovers that Lothario and definite mobster Zed still lives with his ex-wife, which is enough to send her running for the hills. I'd be more concerned with how he's a massive w***er, to be honest, but to each their own. Naya, sort of separated from musician husband Andre, flirts with CSI Warwick Brown at a bar. Then she drunkenly sort of dumps said husband after discovering that he's hanging out in a hotel room with fellow musician Heidi, who appears to be a dual tribute act. A cautionary tale about taking Miranda's advice there. Have you been wondering what Charlotte's tits look like these days? Well, you're in luck, because you're going to find out whether you like it or not. Mrs. York Goldenblatt's non-issue this week is that her plans to bring Anthony as her date to the Met Gala are temporarily thwarted by husband Harry's unexpected desire to go instead. Harry's super into the idea of wearing a top hat, which after 20 years of being married to Charlotte, I'd probably consider the highlight of my month too. He also wants to meet Rihanna for some reason, perhaps hoping that she'll take pity on him and run him over with her limo on the way out. On the big day, Charlotte enlists kids Lily and Rock to break a few of her ribs, getting her into a corset, which leads Rock to exclaim,
"I won't be party to upholding the patriarchy and the heteronormative standards of beauty."
F***ing hell, we get it, Rock. Sit the next few out. It isn't until Charlotte and Harry are about to leave their building that he remembers that he actually hates formal events. Or he caught sight of his reflection and realised that he accidentally dressed like an undertaker. And that his wife dressed like she got ready in the dark before an audition for Moulin Rouge. That's when Anthony is summoned from a pity party of fiddle faddle to accompany Charlotte after all. And let that be a lesson to all of you. Never take a straight man to the Met Gala. Take a gay man who will actually appreciate it. And just for the record, not that it wasn't the case last season too, but on this go round, the show has really dispensed with any sense of these being real people. Some of them used to go to sexy fireman contests and eat lunch at pizzerias. Now it seems like they'd have to burn their whole outfit if they saw a minimum wage worker from the viewing deck of their blimp. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this season we get a scene where they run out of toilet paper at a restaurant and share a stack of 50s between them to get the job done. Season 2 of Sex and the City revival series, and just like that, continues to prove that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But eventually, it will at least give it a go, if the alternative is a one-way trip to the vet. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more before we jump into how the show is still obsessed with its past and still hasn't got the first idea what to do about it. Having twice in her life been allowed to pick a title for her creative output, and both times gone with Sex and the City, Carrie continues to recoil at the very idea of discussing her own, or anyone else's, stinky speedway. This time around, she refuses to talk up a brand of secret fish forest suppositories on her podcast, which wrathful studio manager Chloe reveals is threatening the financial well-being of the whole company. Just a thought, but if your whole organisation is riding on a single plug for vagine humidifiers, then for once, Carrie might not be the biggest liability in the building. The root cause of Carrie's ridiculous twisting is a twofer. Firstly, she's clearly not a fan of the implication by association that her own furry cup may have runneth dry. Secondly, she doesn't think it's very on-brand for her. Which of course begs the question, what would be these days?
So, your husband died, and you're the worst. Just scream his name 10 times from the bathroom floor, and our voice-activated useless wife life alert will call someone with common sense. Your flooded basement doesn't have to ruin your day. Bradshaw brand adult diapers are good for up to one whole Snapple bottle full of leakage. You never know when a friend might get two in the pink and one in the stinkin' mixed company. That's why our new and improved finger blast blinders are proven to block up to 99% of nearby human rights violations.
Elsewhere, producer with benefits Franklin continues striking out. First, he brings work into bed with them. And if there's one thing Carrie likes talking about less than sex, it's her job. Then he reveals that he wears glasses, and Carrie's reaction couldn't say ick any clearer if it erupted in boils across her forehead. By the time Carrie settles on a rewrite of the ad she can live with, it's too late. She and Franklin return to the studio to find it shutting down faster than an Amber Heard mattress store. Now selfishly causing dozens of redundancies? That's very Bradshaw. As a result, we wave goodbye to Franklin, who wisely judges that a single Carrie Bradshaw with nothing but time in her hands is something you need to maintain a minimum safe distance from. And so, the revival of Sex and the City is cancelled. A phrase you're likely to hear somewhere else sooner rather than later. This week in Who Gives a Shit news, Seema feuds with hairdresser Juan Jose, who accuses her of being too picky after showing up to work with a merkin on his head. He's proved wrong though, when love interest Zed ruins Seema's attempt to reconnect by asking her to invest in what is almost certainly a money laundering front. Bye bye Zed. Herbert's outburst when faced with a racist cab driver leads to a lesson for both he and wife Lisa from his visiting mother in the virtues of rising above. But is a revival of notorious race eraser Sex and the City the right vehicle for it? Surely that's like taking medical advice from the guy who stabbed you. Naya realizes that estranged and baby-crazy husband Andre isn't just on a different page to her, he's in a different book. What to expect when you're expecting, I assume. Her resulting unhinged sweep through their home to remove all of his tat signifies the end of their rubbish marriage. Che's week is spent entertaining Tony Danza, who plays their father in their TV pilot, and talks about gender like someone's holding a live grenade to his face. To Che's horror, he reveals that he's convinced the network to race-bend their Mexican heritage to sidestep any internet backlash about his own casting. If you didn't want to get cancelled, Tony, you shouldn't have taken the call for this show. Miranda continues to have a rocky time in LA this week, as if moving cross-country to become a full-time simp was ever going to be anything but. If you've been wondering what she gets up to all day as an unpaid groupie, it turns out that it's mostly sniffing out truffles in Che's Crave Cave. An act she describes as practice, which is as wholly understandable as it is mildly horrifying. Hold on to your f***ing hats though everyone, because the unthinkable happens. With Che's bacon hole otherwise occupied, Miranda goes to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. The show glosses over her evidently off-screen acceptance of her addiction in typical fashion, but they're obviously listening to the online discourse. In which case... Hey, Michael Patrick King, your show's garbage. Fellow attendee Ali offers a solution to Miranda's listless West Coast existence, volunteering for an environmental group's upcoming beach cleanup. And if there's one thing Miranda's time in Los Angeles so far more than qualifies her for, it's sticking her hands into slimy crevices with a strong oceanic scent. She does manage to do more than most for the environment, however, by accidentally recycling her phone, along with the collected sea garbage. Also, this guy features a lot. I like him. He looks at her the way that I do while I'm watching through my fingers. With Che still indisposed, mysterious stranger Lyle is dispatched to rescue Miranda from the unbearable hellscape of a Californian beach. During the ride back, he reveals that he's actually Che's ex and that they're still legally married. Miranda is, perhaps understandably, stunned. I mean, it's not as if she's ever done anything questionable while still married to somebody else. Has she? Back at home, Miranda confronts Che for keeping secrets and finally realizes that they know sweet FA about each other. But it's all swept under the carpet in record time. Ms. Hobbes isn't wrong though. By that standard, I've got a more committed relationship with Uber Eats. Seriously, we've picked out rings. If Mrs. York Goldenblatt spent any time wondering whether her parents' skills are up to par after last season's fumbling of rocks coming out, then this week provides clear confirmation that neither of her children think she's killing it. Lily is up at bat this time around, demanding an electric keyboard. Apparently, she's a serious artist with something to say now.
I have something that I need to say now. I'm a serious artist. Oh my god.
Alright, chill out, kid. You're 16. Richard Burton's water bowl is deeper than your current emotional maturity. Both parents reject the request on the grounds of teaching her a lesson about financial responsibility. The very same parents who blew a whole wad of cash on a Met Gala outfit that never made it past the lobby, and a thou piece on matching Oscar de la Renta dresses for a high school recital. She'd learn more about sensible money management as Elton John's florist. The eldest Goldenblatt child quickly identifies the ideal way to get what she wants and hit Mother York where it hurts. She sells half her wardrobe to Real stand-in Real Deal, third-party sellers of pre-loved designer cast-offs. Clearly excited to actually have something to do for a change, Charlotte flies into an inconsolable rage over the whole thing, and begins a useless one-sided hate campaign against the Real Deal. Very Moby Dick if the whale was into second-hand Chanel. A brief interlude in the madness of Queen Charlotte arrives when Lily demands an audience for the debut of the urgently important music that caused the whole debacle. It turns out to be a reflection on how awful it is to be a poor little rich girl.
Park Avenue streets, where do they lead? Stuck in the deep, goddamn, the power of privilege.
Imagine Orlando Bloom writing, directing, and starring in a movie about how tough life is when you're packing a beef missile that could restart the Cold War, and you won't be far off. Lily's excruciatingly navel-gazing misfire also features a highly pointed refrain about Charlotte's smothering mothering.
No, I'm not allowed to be me. I'm a good girl, I'm a good girl.
This ultimately leads her to abandon her allegedly sentimental quest to reclaim the bartered dresses and embrace who Lily is in the here and now. Which, as far as I can see, and as beautifully pointed out by Anthony himself,
oh, is she Lily Eilish?
'Cause I always have to.
Is a knockoff Billie Eilish. Personally, I'd check whether the adoption agency do out-of-warranty returns. No time for an intro this week. We need to talk about this dumpster fire right now. Do like and subscribe though, please. I need some kind of incentive to suffer through this every week. You know, it's kind of remarkable how, even in moments where you might genuinely empathise with Carrie, she remains about as sympathetic as a Colleen Ballinger ukulele apology.
Hey, can I buy you a cappuccino?
Oh, thanks. I gotta run. Embarrassingly, they asked me to record the audio version of my new book, so...
Inconveniently, she's tricked by her publisher into 5 days of recording for the audiobook version of her latest self-involved tome. What's the book about, you ask? Take a wild guess.
It's a book about your husband passing. We want to make sure you have enough time. Okay? It's a lot.
Okay.
Somewhere in the city, Jack Berger is slamming his head in a door. When it comes to reading aloud the chapter which describes Big's actual death, she finds herself overcome with emotion. Despite having, written it herself. That being said, the scene where she really gets into it is one of those vanishingly rare moments where the show actually gets it right. The sound of the shower, the warping words, the fading lighting, it's effective. But then, of course, they have to go and ruin it. On the way home, Carrie bumps into Bitsy Von Muffling, fresh from having her whiskers yanked out. Which is ironic, considering how many of her recent years were spent as a beard to Nathan Lane's screamingly camp Bobby Fine. At least before his death, which I would assume occurred at the bottom of a dog pile on Fire Island. Bitsy, who looks like she just stepped off the set of The Dark Crystal, basically confirms that Carrie's life as a widow is going to be shit forever. Which is all the permission she needs to throw all of that goodwill from the studio right out the window. And so she hotfoots it home and promptly calls in sick for the next week, lying to and ghosting all of her friends in the process. Which is when the AJLT production team screw the pooch again. See that? All of those messages were sent that day. So, either she did a full day of recording in the studio, met Bitsy and shut down the shoe department at Bergdorf Goodman all before 1 PM, or even if this is a different day, she arranged lunch when she already knew she wouldn't be going. Come on, people, details matter. Eventually realizing that she can't hide forever, she returns to the studio and finishes the book. One whole chapter of which, it seems, is dedicated to the 30 seconds it took Big to expire, which is a Stephen King level of commitment to unnecessary detail. She and Seema celebrate with seafood, cocktails, and an Australian rugby team, who it's implied get Carrie sick for real. This week in Who Gives a Shit news, Seema gets her bag stolen. Then she's astonished to find it ditched in a bush. She probably shouldn't be. The resale value of a purse must go through the floor when it smells like someone's been using it as an ashtray. Che films their big TV pilot, during which unhinged writer BD humiliates them in front of the studio audience, calling out their lack of acting pedigree. And considering that the script sounds like ChatGPT was asked to write a non-binary version of Joni Loves Chachi, surely that should have been humiliation enough. Naya agrees to a date with one of Lisa's sound technicians, who has big arms. Which is apparently where we've set the bar now. Let's hope she goes back to his apartment, because she might not want to explain the blazing pile of guitars at hers. Carrie's neighbour Lizette exhibits her jewellery creations in Bryant Park, but her hopes of landing a big contract are dashed by the world's least subtle thief, who's apparently under the impression that there's black market demand for accessories that look like they were washed up on a beach. I'd argue he did the world a favour. Miranda continues to struggle with finding her identity in LA, and it's not hard to see why. The handbrake turn the show took with her personality last season only gives so much road to go down, and it seems as though we've reached a cliff edge. Let's hope she and Che don't Thelma and Louise it. Like all white women in crisis, her first instinct is to get some ink. Tattooist Ricky suffers through her self-pitying tale long enough to suggest a robot design, commemorating what Miranda now looks back on as a wasted life of corporate servitude. You know, the same one that made her financially stable enough to live, laugh, love her way through California. Her delusionally idyllic Cali life is brought to a screeching halt, however, when Brady calls. Because Brady, we discover, is a whiny little bitch.
Mom, where have you been? I've been calling since yesterday. You never answer. I called you like 10 times. Louisa broke up with me. The car almost hit me. I wish it had. I'm crying too hard. People are looking.
I wonder who he learned that from. Ex-girlfriend Louisa ditched him in Amsterdam, perhaps after waking up one morning to realise she was in a relationship with an only slightly more masculine version of strawberry shortcake. This poorly timed conflama comes as Miranda is walking into Che's TV pilot taping. And at the worst possible time, Ms. Hobbes abruptly decides to start being a mother again, having taken a ding-dong-ditch approach to her separation from Steve last season. Under the circumstances, a smart person would choose: deal with your son or support your partner. Naturally, Miranda tries to do both, and in the process ends up doing neither. A skill she developed towards the end of her marriage, presumably. Right as the pilot gets to a pivotal emotional moment, Brady decides to call back for more wine time.
Oh my god! Oh my god, oh my god.
Because, apparently, the only thing the children of this show and its predecessor are good for is ruining key moments in the lives of the adults around them. Nice job, kids! Miranda and Che leave things on a sour note as the former heads back to New York, where she reveals that the highly original tattoo she got was of her own initials on her wrist. Look! Irony! Somebody's been reading their screenwriting for dummies. Brady finally returns, sobbing like a James Van Der Beek meme and finally having any sort of reaction to his parents' divorce, which the writers apparently forgot to do last year, and which he was seemingly only capable of connecting to emotionally after a breakup of his own. Get used to it, dude. Your genetic heritage doesn't really speak to a bright future when it comes to lasting relationships. Alright, here's where we really go off the rails. Along with Lisa, Charlotte's preoccupation this week is the recent discovery of a meth list at their kids' school, drafted by a mystery teen. Now, this may shock you, but I'm not a mother, so maybe my instincts are off. But what would you say is the most appropriate way to feel about this development? Concerned? Horrified? Disgusted? Would it be horny? Because that's what these two, and apparently every other mother present for its announcement, collectively experiences. It's like someone allowed the secure wing of a prison to rewrite Spring Awakening for their talent show. Charlotte is apparently ranked 3rd out of all the mothers of the Arbor School. See, I try as much as possible not to talk too much about physical appearance in these videos. Bitsy, who looks like she just stepped off the set of The Dark Crystal. Oh, shut up. But come on, kid. Modern day Charlotte looks like her morning routine involves standing in a wind tunnel and having somebody fire Elmer's glue at her from a t-shirt cannon. Maybe MF stands for maturity, I'd like to forget. When the mothers gather at the school to see who the MF list creator is, this happens. What? Are you f***ing kidding me? Who in their right mind signed off on that scene? Oh, right, yeah, of course. Do I need to say this? Having a bunch of middle-aged women catcalling a, 16-year-old at best, and trying to pass it off as a funny role reversal is not okay. Do you know why? Because when he gets caught, he gets a note on his college application. When they get caught, they get to be the least popular inmates on a crossover episode of Orange is the New Black. Hey you, thanks for coming. I wasn't sure if you'd even show up, to be honest. Look, we've been through a lot together, and I just thought it was really important to say this face to voice before you heard it from anyone else. I kind of liked this episode. I know, and I have no right to ask this of you, but if you could just find it in your heart to like and subscribe, I'll explain why. This week, Carrie is blessed by the welcome reappearance of eternally PO'd ex-mentor Enid Frick. Since retiring from Vogue, Enid got herself an age-appropriate boyfriend and set up Ask Enid, a newsletter apparently rivaling Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop, but hopefully not selling candles that smell like an electrical fire at SeaWorld. Carrie reveals that Enid successfully dodged a request to blurb her latest book, although it's a bit of a mystery why she'd even want her to. Enid couldn't make her disdain any clearer if she dragged her by the hair to the bathroom and made her watch as she used it as toilet paper. But this painful interaction does score Carrie a patronising invite to contribute to Enid's new online magazine for older women, Vivant. Other titles considered include Abandonné, Sèche, and Je suis tombée et je ne peux pas m'y relever. Carrie's under the impression that her invite to Vivant's startup is because Enid's after her writing skills, which she hopes to parlay into a plug for her book. Incorrect. What Enid really wants is the widow Preston's big fat bequeathed bank balance. If Carrie was wondering how the situation could get any worse, the universe answers by seating her next to Bitsy, who reveals that she's the reason that Carrie's been receiving texts from beige potential suitor Marlon. A man who wears yellow sweaters but also has a notoriously gigantic pig sticker. So, swings and roundabouts. During a speech by legendary feminist and Christian Bale's stepmother Gloria Steinem, not a joke, look it up, Bitsy sends Carrie an unsolicited snap of Marlon's sizable snozwanger, which is about as good a summary of this show's contribution to modern feminism as you're likely to see. Unfortunately, Marlon and his seemingly widely enjoyed vein cane turn out to be one and the same with Enid's off-screen beau, proving that one way or the other, Carrie Bradshaw is Miss Frick's infinitely repeating canon event. Carrie's story this week was kind of fun, though, right? A good legacy character, some actual comedy, and a healthy, repeated dose of self-imposed humiliation. Of course, I won't get used to it, unless the rest of the season is Enid stalking Carrie around New York like an arthritic remake of It Follows. Now that, I'd watch. This week in Who Gives a Shit news, it's all happening at the Wexley's lavish 20th anniversary party, which, due to shoddy organisation, suffers a turnout on par with the average straight pride rally. Lisa invites her father, Lawrence, to the occasion, played by the always welcome Billy D. Williams. That would be the same father she told Charlotte was dead last year.
I could barely keep it together in front of the girls just now.
I was the exact same way when I lost my dad last year. I could see my rings literally shaking on my hands while I was trying to be so strong for them.
So, either Lisa is a sociopath or the writers are morons. I'll let you decide. Victor Garber guests as gallery owner Mark Kasabian, though unfortunately goes the whole episode without designing a mode of transport capable of killing over 1,500 people. He offers Charlotte a job, having been impressed by her long dormant career. Sounds like it's time for Mark to get his prescription checked. At the party's conclusion, and attempting to save him from her father's judgment, Lisa commits Herbert to a run for city comptroller. I guess we'll have to wait and see if the penchant for homemade apple juice comes with the position. Charlotte and Harry join Lisa and Herbert to wave their kids off to 4 weeks of sleepaway camp. Lisa's son Henry does his Urkel routine.
I am 95% sure.
That leaves a 5% window of error. I don't like those odds.
Which is how we know he'll be spending the month learning macrame and being disowned by his siblings. The York Goldenblatts rush home for a bit of uninterrupted hanky-panky, the grand finale of which is Charlotte enthusiastically asking Harry to ice her baps. Personally, I'm with Richard Burton. And while Harry thinks he's delivered a fresh batch of pale marmalade, he soon realizes that his jar is involuntarily empty. Discussing this development at lunch, Charlotte continues her filibuster on Gentleman's Relish in the clearest evidence yet of her own Miranda-style personality transplant. Her sex positivity is through the roof, even trying to rewrite history with the claim that she always loved a good dose of tail juice. I'd put good money on her revealing her own red room in the next episode. After their doctor confirms that Harry's erectoplasm has just gone on vacation to his bladder, Charlotte takes it upon herself to teach him the wonders of the pelvic floor workout. By way of a resume, she shows him that her lower ground funhouse has the crushing power of Honey Boo Boo at terminal velocity. Her militaristic Kegel drills work, and Harry's back to blasting crack wax in no time. Not much more to it than that, really. Do you want some more euphemisms to pass the time? Let's see, there's snake spray, trouser gravy, fun gel, daddy sauce. Back in NYC and relegated to the sofa in her former family home, Miranda tries her best to adapt by getting them all into group therapy. A tiny hint of the old Miranda, as rare these days as a Che Diaz punchline. However, naive modern-day Miranda hasn't banked on Brady making her separation from newfound boxing enthusiast Steve his entire personality. At said therapy session, and with the kind of dead-eyed stare that usually puts you on a watch list, Brady turns the spotlight on his parents.
Right. Yeah.
Steve, our designated good cop, reassures him,
Hey, nobody's saying you're an idiot.
I am. I'm saying that. In short order, Steve agrees to move out, and Brady announces that he won't be going to college. I think someone needs to call Operation Varsity Blues. Of course, Miranda's healthy choices were never going to last forever, and her self-destructive streak comes roaring back with the return of Che. Visiting their new Hudson Yards apartment with Carrie, Miranda's surprised to see Che's ex and current husband Lyle there, intending to stay the night. After Carrie's chased from the building by the very mention of non-traditional relationships, the same way most people run from demons, Che decides to play in the box Brady came in, which Lyle decides to get in on too, and is about as welcome as a wasp at a barbecue. Although initially game, Miranda eventually relegates herself to the couch, telling Che and Lyle to carry on without her. We're thankfully saved from the unbearable neurosis that would have caused when Che decides not to after all. Understandable, considering that based on his hair and clothes alone, Lyle looks dirtier than a Michael Jackson bedtime story. You know, I really hate to say it, but this might be the second episode in a row of And Just Like That, which feels a lot more like the Sex and the City of yore trying to break through. Like a drowned pigeon surfacing through a layer of pond scum, but still. So why don't you like this video and subscribe before they take away my snark card? Only joking, there's still plenty wrong with it. Let's get into it. Since we seem to be doing the same year in the life approach as last season, this week is Halloween. Miranda is still trying and failing to have it all, with her family life rubbing up against the one she's trying to build with Che, but not in a way that either of them might enjoy.
Finish him!
Steve still hasn't moved out, so Che can't stay over, and staying at Che's place means a 5 AM commute back to Brooklyn. The reason for the early mornings is Miranda's increasingly desperate attempts to maintain a sense of normalcy for a deeply unappreciative Brady. This translates to pancakes and pumpkin carving, like he's a 4th grader who doesn't understand why mommy and daddy don't make sheet monsters together anymore. Miranda fills Naya in on her situation, saying,
I'm exhausted and I look it.
Agreed. She accepts Naya's offer of her spare room as a solution, so going back to living like a college freshman. At which point, I wonder, is she going to wake up to the fact that her life is getting objectively crappier every week? Whatever that therapist has her on, I want some. Elsewhere, ABC are apparently very excited about Che's pilot, which is how we know they haven't watched it yet. To their surprise, but not mine, focus group testing reveals that Che is the least popular part of their own self-titled sitcom.
The whole Che character was like a walking boomer joke that felt so fake to me.
Ouch. As a result, it's cancelled faster than the Carrie Diaries.
Cancel!
Che, newly christened as a failed sellout, proves that they have done some acting research by taking the news like their next role is in Downfall.
This isn't a game. This is my life. This is my career. This is my identity. It took me 46 years to figure out who I am, and then a focus group 1 hour to fucking destroy me.
As utterly self-obsessed as anyone on this show ever is, Che decides to toxically lash out at Miranda's attempts to help and asks for space. Frankly, I'd cut my losses at this point. She'd get the same experience by drawing a face on an inflated rubber glove and listening to tapes of Tom Cruise screaming at film crews.
I don't ever want to see it again! Ever!
Charlotte and Harry host a Halloween fundraiser, which they attend dressed as the leads from The Americans, which is only there as a lead-in for Charlotte to come within striking distance of the fourth wall by proclaiming,
"This show is brilliant. Everyone's insane."
"Sure thing, Shaw. The Americans won 26 awards. Let's see how your show stacks up." This meta watch party is interrupted by Rock, who, in one of the laziest pieces of writing we've seen yet, was scouted at the skate park by a rep from Ralph Lauren. Harry's the only one to pick up on the overt nonciness of the situation, whereas Mrs. Goldenblatt abruptly transforms into a dance mom at the first sniff of vicarious entry into the world of fashion. When Charlotte and Rock turn up to the photo shoot, Dina Lohan here can't help but blurt out that she used to be a mole model. It tracks, in all honesty, but we're sadly robbed of a flashback. I'd guess a swampier version of Tiffany's I Think We're Alone Now video. Not quite ready to let go of his Halloween persona, Harry rocks up in the world's least convincing wig to do an undercover expose on the photographers. He means well, but in the process accidentally goes full method and winds up cosplaying a Chris Hansen interviewee. As it turns out, everything is actually above board, and all Rock's required to do is jump on a trampoline against a plain backdrop. Which just goes to show that the people calling the shots in this show haven't developed their understanding of any of their subject matter past the late 90s. This week in Who Gives a Shit news, Naya's manhunt at a hotel bar with Carrie and Seema leads to a one-night stand with, it must be said, the extremely camp-sounding Ian.
My name's Ian.
Regardless, he rocks her world and lends her a new positivity about divorcee life. And a spot in Bitsy's WhatsApp support group for variously self-aware hags. On the same night, Seema gets her end away with gin brand rep Edward, who has to pump his padge to get it going. Get it? Edward. Ed. E.D. Seema puts up with the B+ rough and tumble, but gives him the heave-ho when he hypocritically takes issue with her use of a faff buzzer. Shoot for those stars, girl. And Anthony's gaydar malfunctions at Charlotte's Halloween party, short-circuited by the abs of a straight guy he thought he saw in the gym's sauna. And there I was, assuming that the only thing he got a close-up view of in there was the tiling. Carrie opens strong this week by responding when asked where best to meet single men.
A Marvel movie?
Alright, bitch. Calm down. On her way to lunch, Carrie stops to chat on her phone in the middle of a bike lane, causing tech entrepreneur George to crash and break his wrist. A timely reminder that her perception of the world extends only as far as her outermost layer of clothing.
Oh my god, I have to go. I think I may have killed a man. Yells
Carrie. You'd think she'd be able to tell the difference by now. In a move she's quick to clarify is about avoiding a lawsuit and not because she gives a rat's ass, Carrie escorts George to the nearest urgent care, where she stands by as he struggles to pay for his treatment like she isn't sitting on a pile of cash that would make Mr. Monopoly prolapse. But she does offer to help him out in other ways. Yes, it is what you're thinking, but she also hoofs it over to his ostentatious tech bro loft with a care package. Why? Because she thought he was penniless and starving. Good tidings, everyone! Carrie's found the solution to poverty. 3 types of soup and a loosely packed kebab. Carrie also offers to help him complete a big presentation he's working on, and in the process reveals that she can type 92 words per minute. Whereas I just discovered that I can do 99. It's not strictly relevant, I just had to know I was better. It's a short jump from there to 2 separate rounds of afternoon delight, both of which are interrupted by George's strung-out business partner Paul, who unironically uses the word bro.
Right to jail, right away.
She ditches George in his sparsely decorated Bond villain hideout because he's married to Paul already, and it's all a bit too tangled. Lady, last week you were shilling a book about your dead husband. You come with so much unexpected baggage that I'm surprised airlines don't try to check you before boarding. After 2 fairly solid weeks, it was only a matter of time before, and just like that, fell back into old habits. By which I mean having as firm a grip on reality as 2011 Charlie Sheen. So, grab yourself a warm pint of tiger blood, like and subscribe, and let's get into it. Carrie kicks things off by taking a glancing blow to her ego. During a Zoom call to promote gloomy almanac Loved and Lost, an unnamed influencer commits the capital offense of not knowing who our plucky protagonist is. It's a cheap, thinly veiled shot at
Kinsey's
perceived lack of work ethic, which is particularly rich coming from a show so obsessed with shallow materialistic guff that I often wonder if it's being written by a bunch of magpies that got into a stash of Adderall. Since that promotional effort didn't work out, Carrie hoofs it over to the unofficially titled WidowCon. Basically Coachella for the involuntarily despoused, but the crying comes before the narcotics. Unfortunately, the event coincides with an epic snowstorm, which prompts Carrie to wear this absolutely ridiculous Montclair sleeping bag. The f*** she did. It's a bizarre sequence, not least because of the stylish poise Carrie holds throughout. If this was real life, you could leave the house in Arctic survival gear, and in that weather, still arrive at your destination looking like you share a wig maker with Phil Spector. Having wildly misread the brief once again, Carrie expects a miserable circle jerk she can look down on, but instead finds a surprisingly upbeat gathering. Upon which, of course, she drops the profound buzzkill that is her latest po-faced witterings.
Geez, I wouldn't have come all this way in the snow if I'd known the widow wand was on back order.
You suck!
But this is Carrie's world, and we just live in it, so as usual, her literary depression bomb goes down a treat. And she manages to sell plenty of future kindling to her unwitting victims. And if that doesn't work out, they can always burn that horrible f***ing coat. Oh, and it's almost Aiden time. You can tell because he's brought up in passing out of absolutely nowhere, with a load of exposition making it crystal clear that he's single. Carrie winds up dropping him an exploratory email, which he could, but won't delete. So when he does show up, he and his appalling risk assessment skills are now fair game. This week in Who Gives a Shit news, barring a brief nut-cracking from daughter Gabrielle, Herbert's function this episode is to continue the boring tug-of-war between his and Lisa's competing careers. It seems to pointlessly rear its head every week, so who cares? Here's a picture of a puppy instead. Speaking of Lisa, she's the guest of a very badly attended Q&A at the Museum of Modern Art for her documentary. But the most interesting thing she does this week is wear this getup. Is it just me, or do you keep expecting her to scream humbug and chuck a bag of coins at the poorest kid she can see from her bedroom window?
Scrooge is saved. What can happen now?
Yeah.
And Seema invites Carrie to summer with her in the Hamptons at a house she's rented. A storyline they're trailing way too far in advance for it not to end in disaster. Did anyone else catch a weird vibe coming off the whole thing though? If it's what I think it is, I'm gonna flip a table. The cracks are really starting to show in Miranda's relationship with Che, which I'm happy to say is only metaphorical. After doing the deed, Miranda wants to cuddle, a word no adult should be using, FYI, but Che's not into it, asking,
Oh, cuddle? Why am I Paddington Bear?
Of course not, Che. People actually like him. Miranda finally twigs that the rest of the world is getting a fake happy-go-lucky Che via some truly rotted cameo messages, while she's left to lap up the dribbles of acid left at the bottom of their social battery. Another metaphor that I encourage you not to think too long about. Their confrontational reaction to Miranda's discovery of undeclared booby pics from fans also gives a glimpse behind the curtain of Che's anything goes attitude to relationships, which seems increasingly like a cover for them being able to do anything they want without consequences. Anything except tell a funny joke, apparently. Evidently only happy when her entire life is ablaze, Miranda distracts herself by resolving to broach the topic of divorce with a still lingering Steve. This move, it transpires, is like sticking your fingers in a mousetrap because you fancy some cheese. And with much the same results. Because when she does confront him, she leads with the schoolboy error of staking a claim on their house because the mortgage is only in her name. Which, I'm happy to say, is all it takes for Steve to unleash nearly 25 years of pent-up resentment. I mean, just listen to this. It is epic.
You never wanted me. And you never even wanted Brady! So why don't you go find a new place and get the f*** out of our lives?
And let's be honest, it's pretty difficult to argue with him. Miranda hasn't been patiently waiting for Steve to be ready for divorce. She's been patiently waiting for him to just give her everything, which she evidently feels entitled to despite her wandering whisker biscuit having been the reason it all fell apart in the first place. The Olivia Wilde strategy, I believe. Allegedly. Turns out she should have slowed her roll on notifying Steve that divorce papers are incoming because Che's got some news for her too. They admit that things won't get any better between the two of them and swiftly end it. Which I would argue actually immediately makes things better, in the same way as removing a cactus from your ass beats sitting on it for the rest of your life. So just to take inventory for a second. No masters, no marriage, no relationship, no home, and nothing else to show for it. If I was her, I'd just cut my losses, move back to California, and start dating a psycho nurse. Just a thought. Rock's boring throwaway ad campaign for Ralph Lauren makes an inexplicably full-page debut in the New York Times this week. And everyone cares for what feels like an overly generous period of 30 seconds. I mean, let's talk about it for a second, shall we? It's fairly obvious that across 2 seasons, the show has all but admitted defeat when it comes to finding anything interesting to do with Charlotte and Harry. Which will happen if you try to keep things going after you've sent people off with a happy ending. Same rule goes for illegal massage parlors. As a result, this week we ricochet back onto their other daughter, Lily, who has decided that now she's 17, it's high time she punched her V-card with boyfriend Blake. Lily, you may remember, sang a rancid, highly relatable song a few weeks back about the pain of being a rich, privileged brat. Which is why it's so surprising to find her demanding reservations at Nobu prior to Blake's 10-second debut performance. I guess being just like everyone else loses its shine when faced with the prospect of getting clumsily shockered by a guy whose fingers are still covered in the remnants of his Happy Meal. To her credit, Charlotte does give Lily a pep talk about ensuring she enjoys herself as much as Blake. Now, feel free to disagree with me, but presuming this is also Blake's first go-round, expecting him to do what men triple his age never mastered is a touch presumptuous. She'd probably stand a better chance jumping from the top of the stairs and landing on his Happy Meal toy. During the aforementioned snowstorm, Lily calls from Blake's place to request that Charlotte brave the blizzard to buy her a pack of squirt skirts. Whereas I would have told her to find a rubber band and a shower cap and make do, Charlotte's desire to avoid a teenage pregnancy-related excommunication from her social circle wins out. Like an Uber powered by shame, she manages to track down a selection of dong bags and delivers them to Lily at Blake's door. And then just stands looking up at what she must assume is the bedroom window. Let's either hope the bed doesn't have a street view or Blake is super into being watched. Ladies and gentlemen, she got him. Yes, this is the episode of And Just Like That where Aidan Shaw comes back for a record 4th emotional beating. And considering how much it's been hyped, it's a mess. Leave a like, subscribe, and we'll get into it. We kick things off with Carrie literally clutching her pearls at the sight of Aidan's inevitable reply to her Dear John Corbett email. As has been tradition since the comparatively good old days of Sex and the City, her first instinct is to dissect this development like a high school biology frog. Over a lunch with Miranda and Charlotte, where it looks like that's exactly what they're eating. Evidently not keen on accepting her destiny and going full Miss Havisham, Carrie trots down to her inevitable Valentine's Day date with Mr. Shaw. After an excruciatingly contrived miscommunication, their fated catch-up is brief. Weirdly brief. Almost like they can't be bothered to do this storyline properly. And it's not hard to work out why. If Carrie and Big was supposed to be breakfast at Tiffany's, then she and Aidan were dumpster steaks behind Golden Corral. He was probably her best boyfriend, but easily her worst relationship. If the implication here is supposed to be that with Big out of the picture, their only obstacle is gone, and that's precisely what's going on here, then the show is essentially trying to pass off all blame for Carrie's own actions onto a corpse. The furthest it's willing to go is to have Aidan refuse to set foot in Carrie's apartment because of the awful history they have there. So now it's the apartment's fault. As far as I'm concerned, that apartment is the real victim here. If those walls could talk, they'd scream. But then they just get a hotel, which is like moving home but taking the termites with you. Regardless, Carrie Bradshaw once again gets her man for at least the rest of this season, and I suppose it's too much to hope that this is some vengeance-fueled long con. All I'm saying is, if Aidan pulls out another engagement ring, Carrie had better check he doesn't have a detonator in his other hand. We're reintroduced to a rare curio this week, a single Miranda Hobbes. Don't celebrate too soon, though, because we discover that in all the time she was with Che, Miranda gave as much thought to what it meant for her sexual orientation as the average reaction YouTuber gives to how they're going to fill an 8-minute video. Spurred on by Charlotte, who since last season has decided to become the Grand Marshal of the Miranda Pride Parade, Ms. Hobbes checks out the gay dating scene. By which I mean meets voice actor Amelia at a bookstore, where she's giving a ridiculously arch reading of Pride and Prejudice, a Jane Austen novel where the protagonist marries a man she hated. No surprise that Miranda can relate, then. She ends up invited to Amelia's apartment, which she arrives at dressed to the nines and expecting high romance. What she gets is a heel full of cat shit, in a dwelling most people would immediately assume they're going to die in. An extremely optimistic Amelia assumes that another Austen quote is enough to entice Miranda into a sheetless bed covered in cat toys with a woman who just wiped crap off her socks with her bare hands. Which, I would hope you agree, it is not. Miranda hightails it out of there before lame Austen makes it back from the laundry room, realising that dating is just as big a nightmare as it ever was. And we're left to wonder why she'd ever assume that dating women would be better. Has she met her friends? This week in Who Gives a Shit news, Naya bakes a chocolate souffle. That's it. The whole episode. And that's why this segment has the name that it does. Lisa's fashion choices are drifting somewhat. I'm hardly an expert, but this looks like she's off to work a shift at the pier in 1994. Ironically, she spends her week obsessively ruining son Herbert Jr.'s sex life for no apparent reason. Maybe the first reviews for her documentary are in. Ghosted by Miranda and forced to Airbnb their apartment, Che winds up returning to their old job as a receptionist at an animal hospital. Do you feel that? That's the universe correcting itself. But don't get used to it, I also feel a second wind coming. And Seema continues her weird campaign against the concept of coupledom by going ham on a massage parlour's Valentine's Day policy. Because nothing says secure singleton like hitting the Karen high score at the very idea of someone else's happiness. Nearly 2 seasons deep, and Anthony is finally given something to do. That is, other than deliver baked goods to Charlotte's apartment like a flamboyant variant of the Bimbo Bear. He's faced with a self-inflicted walkout of his hot fellas delivery men after realising that they're pumped with enough HGH to give the Hulk tits. And wouldn't you know it, right as Drew Barrymore invites him onto her talk show to whip out his loaf. In need of a bulging breadbasket to parade on TV, Charlotte comes through when she happens upon cash-strapped poet Giuseppe. And the Italian Stallion's unexpectedly whopping wang gives Drew and her audience enough flooded basements to bankrupt a mid-size insurance company. Giuseppe agrees to come work for Anthony temporarily, setting in motion what will become the upgrade to end all upgrades for Mr. Marantino in future episodes. At least Stanford's still living his best life in Tokyo, where I assume he's allowed the locals to believe that he's a vacationing Danny DeVito after a 3-part Queer Eye intervention. Remember last episode when I said that everything that happens to Charlotte and Harry is about their stupid kids? Keep it in mind. Rock's not so into their burgeoning modelling career, as it turns out, despite the over-the-top support of their school friends. I mean, come on. These are 13-year-old rich girls. If that was real life, one of them would have lost their mind, wheeled around and knocked Rock out with a burn book full of ugly selfies. The other cause of Rock's apathy is Charlotte herself, who by her own admission has gone full momager. After shopping Rock around like a sulky piece of meat, the youngest Goldenblatt announces that they'd rather spend their time being whiny and annoying in obscurity. I wonder which parent they inherited that from. And after debuting her minging original songs at school, Lily's about as popular as a mood stabilizer at a Red Table Talk. So Charlotte agrees to cede the apartment to her eldest's Galentine's Day party while she and Harry enjoy a Valentine's Day dinner. On the way out, Mrs. G fatefully samples some brownies brought by one of the partygoers. Yup, we're doing that. And so it comes to pass that Charlotte's accidental edible experience causes her to realise that her life is basically shit. She resolves to restart her long-dead career by accepting the gallery job offered to her by Mark Kasabian a few weeks back. And we're left with the only interesting thing to have happened to Charlotte in nearly 2 years having been caused by Of course, one of her nasty little crotch goblins. I'm starting to wonder if this show is secretly sponsored by Trojan. Buckle up, kids! Not only because And Just Like That hits the proverbial accelerator this week, but also because it's driving like Caitlyn Jenner. Like and subscribe, pull the handbrake, and let's get into it. We discover early doors that Carrie and Aiden's solution to his understandable fear of the Bradshaw House of Horrors was to stay off and on for a month in a hotel. The latest in And Just Like That's finger on the pulse line of relatable content. If you can feel the wind peeling back the skin on your face, that's because Carrie's speedrunning their relationship like she's on a deadline. She invites herself to visit Aiden's Virginia farmhouse and meet his kids, the whole time wittering on about it all being very Howard's End. A story of intergenerational partner hopping we can only hope that Carrie isn't intending to repeat. Won't somebody think of the children? I think I'm ready to go on record and say that And Just Like That either doesn't think it'll get a third season or doesn't intend to have one regardless, because they are racing for the finish line here. I'd have less of a feeling of whiplash if I stole a city bus and jackknifed it through the front of Carrie's abandoned apartment. A series of later confessions confirms what the show's been driving at with all of this, namely that a wall has come down between Carrie and Aiden. The rotting, mouldy wall in question, of course, being Mr. Big, and the associated revelation being that choosing him over Aiden was a mistake. And there you have it. The time delay between Carrie and anybody with common sense is 19 years. That being said, in the process of erasing a controversial ex-cast member and their character from the narrative, they've inadvertently exposed something gross about Carrie. Imagine being Big, staring up from hell, hearing his beloved wife label him a mistake just because she's managed to entice her ex back into the web. Grim. And so Carrie, who let's not forget has a history of disappearing animals she feels inconvenienced by, jets off to Virginia to stay on a farm. Character growth? Or another piece of her long-established personality being chipped away to fit a storyline? Who cares? At this point, Carrie's got as much pull with the audience as a Rita Ora tweet. In preparation for her new full-time position at the Kasabian Gallery, Charlotte shops for new work outfits. That's how we discover that she intends to buy an updated version of what she wore in her 30s. And stood next to Lisa, whose look I will get to later, it's no surprise that she's inspired to revisit the 90s. An encounter with a passive-aggressively helpful shop assistant leads Charlotte to believe that she has a visible fupa, which in turn leads her to slap on enough Spanx to asphyxiate an entire bridal party. And once again, it's left for us to draw lines between this show and Sex and the City, because Charlotte's body dysmorphia has reared its head before. But, as you might expect, the show misses these opportunities for connective tissue and meaningful social commentary as hard as it misses the point of anything. When a week-long bone broth diet fails to remove one of her 2 remaining body fat percentage points, Char takes the plunge and goes back to work trussed up like an arthritic joint. Which is where we get an absolutely gross scene where she's inspired to ditch the elastic torture devices by the presence of a staff member bigger than she is. But then again, that's hardly a surprise. This wouldn't be the first time that Charlotte's commitment to sisterhood has been overridden by her own self-interest, much like Rita Ora's adherence to lockdown rules. This week in Who Gives a Shit news, a still financially ruined Che receives a lifeline when Carrie and Aiden sublet their fancy Hudson Yards apartment, setting them on the road to recovery. Remember the days when a main character broke up with someone and that person just f***ed off? I miss that. Lisa's stylistic choices continue to veer off the rails with this knee-length turtleneck dress, yellow fleece cape, and fanny pack combination. She's either offended the costume department or Professor X has invited her to hop back in time and join the f***ing X-Men. And the cause of Seema's weird anti-couple vendetta is revealed. She cancels her Hamptons plans with Carrie in fear of being left a sad singleton, while Miss Bradshaw drags Aiden off into the sunset. She also meets Marvel director Ravi, who I think is supposed to be a weird parody of Taika Waititi. So expect Seema to be in a throuple with Rita Ora by the end of the next episode. Miranda starts an internship at Human Rights Watch, which briefly brings last season's politically correct hypersensitivity raging back to the surface. A storyline I'm only willing to see them revisit if the conclusion features Ms. Hobbes making national news by snapping during a live press conference and hate criming an entire room of people. She quickly befriends younger interns Serena and Sloane, though this generational bridge only stands for a few brief minutes before Supervisor Rayner shells it by passing them over for a meeting that Miranda gets an invite to. This is, of course, New Age Miranda's nightmare, because they label her privileged for her immediate installation as the teacher's pet. Call it like you see it, ladies. This is cemented when super pregnant Rayner names Miranda her maternity cover, just after Ms. Hobbes announces that she's
a sexually confused alcoholic who's in the midst of a divorce.
Whoa, on that note?
Now there's a person who sounds stable enough to run an office. You'd get lower odds betting that Rita Ora won't appropriate someone else's culture to further her own career. Following his monstrous Meat Mallet's daytime TV debut last week, Giuseppe has proven a runaway hit with the randy customers of Anthony's Hot Fellas Bakery. But Giuseppe's attention is firmly fixed on Mr. Marantino, a fact never more obvious than when he does this. Anthony freaks out and fires his young suitor upon discovering that he's gay, as though having a straight employee 40 years your junior pressing his baguette up against your buns somehow wouldn't be crossing a line. This isn't exactly the first time that this show or its predecessor have shown what I would call a sanitized view of the gay community. But this might actually be the worst offense yet. Take it from me. Every 60-something gay guy who doesn't have to break out his weekly pillbox and wait an hour beforehand wouldn't hesitate to chow down on that freshly baked ciabatta in front of the bread, that floor-to-ceiling window, and God. Making the most of his firing, Giuseppe makes a move on Anthony, and the two embark on their spring-winter relationship for real. Still, at least Giuseppe's intentions seem genuine. Which is a lot more than I can say for, alright fine, I don't like Rita Ora, okay? If in doubt, make a mess. That's the mantra most of the characters in this episode of And Just Like That seem to be living by. Oh my God! As they race towards the season finale. So grab yourself a hazmat suit, like and subscribe, and let's see if we can find a bit of sense somewhere under all this crap. Despite Carrie's best intentions, there's trouble in paradise this week. And that trouble begins with Aiden's youngest son, Wyatt. He's a plain-fearing, sour little dork whose whole vibe suggests that the police will one day have to disarm a booby trap on his bedroom door to recover his manifesto. And boy howdy does he hate Carrie. Not that it's without basis, of course, but he's only 14 and therefore probably doesn't know the half of it. If he thinks that she's the worst now, wait until he finds out what she does when a guy proposes to her. The trouble continues when Aiden's terminal desire to be liked by everyone flags up to Che's building that he and Carrie have breached the apartment's lease by subletting. Someone on the show also decided that we were overdue a shot of John Corbett in tighty whities. Which we were not. In need of somewhere else to live and still unable to use Carrie's apartment due to Aiden's irrational fear that he'll catch emotional warts, Miss Bradshaw seeks out Seema's help. Before long, she finds an enormous 2-floor replacement with room for Aiden's entire family. And, I would hope, a caged basement for Wyatt. We get a whiff of the old Carrie here, flinging herself headlong into objectively insane lifestyle changes in service of a man. Aiden has been back on the scene for a matter of weeks, and she's already buying property and selling her old apartment like New York just announced a cull of single women when they hit 60. She also has an encounter with Aiden's ex-wife Kathy, who politely requests that Carrie doesn't screw Aiden over again and keeps her kids out of any future self-involved scrollings. Which is probably going to prove difficult considering that at least one of them is clearly being set up as a wrecking ball for Miss Bradshaw's Aiden ever after. Sex and the City set trends in fashion, and just like that is going to wind up responsible for an irreversible drop in birth rates. Mark my words. This week in Who Gives a Shit news, Ravi and his wandering English accent drags Seema around a series of potential apartments, a ruse for him to spend more time with her. His decision is made for him when their inevitable first bang is almost interrupted by Ryan from $1 Million Listing New York, who's trying his best. Hey, at least it wasn't Frederick. Harry gets a taste of what it's like to be Charlotte when he arranges an event for pal Herbert's political campaign, and gets snookered by the seemingly complex world of catering. 3 trays of Costco sandwiches, a crate of champagne, and force anyone who complains to discuss privilege with the kids. Simple. Speaking of Herbert, he fails to correctly interpret Lisa's sudden narcolepsy and winds up blindsided by her appallingly timed, and honestly, low-key vindictive announcement that she's pregnant. And now I'm the one falling asleep. Naya's random Tinder hookup can't swipe away the shock of seeing ex-husband Andre and busted Shania Twain knockoff Heidi's pregnancy announcement. I say count your blessings. That thing is going to stroll right out of her wearing a tiny beanie and singing an off-key Taylor Swift cover. And Che meets new love interest Toby, who invites them to reach inside their box. To retrieve stray kittens. Calm down, YouTube. Unfortunately, this inspires Che to get back into stand-up, setting in motion some truly rancid stuff for next episode. And I don't just mean the lazy punchlines. Lucky us, we get a bit of a crossover this week when Miranda and Charlotte's lives collide in the grossest way possible. Brady is still not interested in college, and Miranda is mortally offended at the idea of him working in the service industry, despite the likelihood that her entire life would collapse in a single morning if the staff of her local Starbucks quit en masse to go get their degrees. She convinces Charlotte to enlist Lily's help, since the eldest Goldenblatt Sprog is apparently super focused on further education. When she's not writing music that could cause more seizures than a 90s episode of Pokemon, or forcing her mother to compete in a low-budget amazing race centered around poop balloons, that is. Lily does help Brady, though not in the way that either of their parents intended, as Miranda discovers when she catches her leaving his room early in the morning, sans pants. Charlotte does a bad job of hiding how horrified she is at the thought of Carrot Top having a go on her eldest.
What?
Which isn't cool, but is, let's be honest, understandable in light of who we know Brady to be. Imagine thinking you've just had a great time in bed, only to find that what's dripping onto your face is the guy's tears. Great Value, Cagney and Lacey decide to sleuth their way to the truth at Herbert's party, skulking around the kitchen doing rubbish body language analysis, like a pair of interns the FBI found on Facebook Marketplace. Although, with the way Max is going, I wouldn't be surprised if they got their own mid-season spin-off. Ultimately, they agree that they'd sooner not know what's going on between their hellspawn, which has the added benefit of us not hearing about, or, God forbid, seeing any more of it. My therapy bill from this show is already high enough. While I am pleased that Anthony's getting more airtime, and just like that, still hasn't quite got the hang of doing anything with it that has a ring of truth. For example, after several dates, Giuseppe would like to share his ring of truth with Mr. Marantino, but isn't getting anywhere. The former Mr. Blatch is shy, apparently, as evidenced by his Liza Minnelli wedding and recent appearance on daytime TV. The real reason that Anthony is reluctant to take things any further turns out to be his fear that Giuseppe and his generously proportioned nethers are targeting older men in search of a green card, which in this universe appears to preclude having your insides feng shuied in the meantime. Giuseppe eventually reveals that he's a dual citizen, which is all Anthony needs to hear before helping himself to a heaping portion of Italian sausage. The venue for which is, hilariously, Rock and Lily's room, which I take to be revenge for putting up with 17 years of their shit. Much like some of Stanny's exploits in Sex and the City, there's a hint of showrunner wish fulfillment running through all of this, but I'm not mad at it. The original series had about as much authentic gay representation as the Westboro Baptist Church, so I'll take what I can get.
Surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise! It's a bumper season finale edition of I'm Just Like Crap. And like a travelling carnival with an extremely loose understanding of ride safety, there'll be body parts flying all over the place by the time we're done. Say goodbye to your loved ones, like and subscribe, and let's get into it. Miranda's got 2 hatchets to bury before this season of I'm Just Like That is done. And in defiance of my long-held suspicion that she's a serial killer, opts not to do so in the backs of her enemies. Hatchet 1 concerns Steve, who I guess hasn't had a conversation with his estranged wife since she initiated divorce proceedings, despite her coming and going from his house like it's a timeshare. Inspired by some other events, which we'll get to, and Carrie's continued interference, Miranda locates Mr. Brady at the Coney Island boardwalk. That's where, inspired to embark on a new beginning after his unceremonious dumping, he's bought a clam shack, which is apparently what he gets in place of a happy ending. Let's hope New York's 50-something single women are really into men who come home every night smelling like a fisherman's footlocker. Full of self-pity, Miranda feigns surprise at Steve's understandably downbeat opinion of his last couple of years, as though an out-of-the-blue divorce might have been one of the last things left on his bucket list. His consolation prize is that Miranda finally admits that
you were smart about us buying the house and moving to Brooklyn when we did. And you were right about us being good parents.
Jury's still out on that one, guys. They agree to be friends and draw a definitive line under their marriage, with Steve in particular issuing his strongest assurance yet that he'd rather walk through broken glass than hop aboard the Hobbs Express to hell again. A wise move, which nevertheless doesn't rule out the possibility of it one day careening off the tracks and turning him into a fine mist. Still concerned that she's been dropping exes like a Kardashian, Miranda decides to turn up unannounced at Che's comeback stand-up gig. A decision about as wise as Chris Rock popping out of the cake at Will Smith's next birthday party.
Keep my wife's name out your
Because Che embarks on an absolutely unforgivable, inarguably undeserved character assassination of Ms. Hobbes. It does give Miranda a chance to speak for the audience, though, when she labels the set
Not funny! Not funny!
Which is what I've been saying all season. Che attempts to justify their hateful diatribe as a necessary function of comedy, which might work as a defense were it not for the material being about as funny as an early period in a Shark Tank. Aside from which, exaggerated for comedic effect or not, their supposed issues with Miranda aren't even based in reality.
I just got out of an 8-month relationship with a married straight white woman. Yeah, she brought 4 people into our bed. Me, her, her husband and her son. Yeah, my lady was very confused. All over the LGBTQIA plus men. She was confused about everything.
But nothing to do with you creating an environment as radioactive as a Chernobyl mud bath, right, Che? I'll deal with their insane motivations in a bit, but suffice to say that this feels like the writers admitting defeat and giving viewers some real reasons to hate them. Mission accomplished, I guess? Naturally, Che and Miranda make amends by the end of the season, but it's a weird way to play all of this. Miranda might be trying not to let her exes fall out of her life, but that's a poor excuse for maintaining a connection with someone who has a Jussie Smollett relationship with the truth. Miranda ends the season grabbing drinks with English BBC correspondent Joy, who she met during a trip to the UN. And considering that there appears to have been an unspoken determination made about her sexual orientation, that's likely to be the only BBC Ms. Hobbes gets for the foreseeable future. This season finale in Who Gives a Shit news? Lisa's documentary film is turned into a full series by PBS, sparking an existential crisis about whether she can continue to work flat out and raise a screaming crap factory. The function of this storyline appears to be manufacturing an opportunity for the show to briefly, barely comment on recent events in America, which I'm certain, were I to say them out loud, YouTube would class as controversial. In any event, Lisa doesn't want a smash motion, but loses the baby a short while later. And despite having double the runtime of a Sex and the City episode, and just like that, once again speeds past any sort of meaningful contemplation on a serious topic. I'd like to think they'll pick up the fallout from this storyline in season 3 and do something interesting with it. But honestly, we're just as likely to see Lisa wake up and realise the last year was a dream caused by spoiled zucchini chips. Lizette inherits Carrie's old apartment, a contrivance driven by her having been kicked out of the one downstairs. There are multiple references to the unspecified but apparently extremely generous price that Carrie's selling it to her for.
For the price you got this apartment, the price you sold this apartment for is insanity.
Well, for the price I gave her my apartment.
A generosity she's evidently very keen to make sure everybody and their wife knows about. Seema drops a bollock when mid-coitus she blurts out a declaration of love to new boyfriend Ravi. Her concern is that she's given away her power too early to a man in the sights of many other women, and obliquely refers to not having vetted him yet. Why am I suddenly concerned that she doesn't abide by the Geneva Conventions? When Ravi's required to relocate to Egypt for several months, Seema goes full Fatal Attraction on him. He gently talks the proverbial bunny out of her claws and reassures her that he's in it to win it, even though she won't go with him. A development that only seems to happen in service of making sure Carrie's misery has some company. But we'll get to that. Naya gets some closure when ex-husband Andre mistakes an Instagram comment for an olive branch and invites her to his and Trailer Park Swift's baby shower. Whereas I would have frisbeed my laptop out of the nearest window at the inclusion of a registry, Naya opts to buy them an expensive stroller as a flex. And if anyone would like to similarly flex on me by sending a super chat, my self-esteem is ready and willing to be taken down a few notches. If you cast your minds back to the first episode of this season, you may recall that I thought we'd be seeing more of Toussaint, aka Warwick Brown, aka Gary Dourdan. Sure enough, he reappears in Carrie's storyline and winds up back at Naya's place. And with a CSI level 3 in the house, that means she's going to have to find somewhere else to conceal Heidi's body. Who knows what the hell the writers think they're doing with Che. The show seems to have settled on them having a huge stick up their ass about people who haven't fully figured out their identity. Through some seriously messed up logic, said people are supposedly to blame for Che's belief that the world is forcing them to apologise for being non-binary. Whereas I'd like them to apologise for making Amy Schumer look funny by comparison. This outlook, ironically, demonstrates a level of ignorance as entirely unrecognised by the show as it is utterly pig-shit stupid. Made worse by their pairing with Toby, a cloying groupie who exists only to tell Che that they're right about everything, and to throw in a few more LGBTQIA+ terms that the writers want us to know that they've learned.
No, you know what? I'm not sorry.
Good. Don't be. Own it all of your feelings. There's nothing hotter than a strong NB person. No, I'm sorry, I didn't even ask if you were open to being called NB, I just...
The issue here, as far as I see it anyway, is that Che's being used as a proxy for real-world issues that just aren't happening to the character we're seeing on screen. What we do see is Che acting in a variety of gross ways and refusing to feel genuinely sorry because having to respect other people is somehow conformity. It makes zero sense. With a different character having different experiences, this might have been something. But Che blaming the gripes against them on everyone else's ignorance is like John Wayne Gacy claiming that the police only arrested him because they were scared of clowns. Charlotte's opening gambit in the finale is to sell some Alex Israel artwork to English exile and singer of the second worst modern Bond song, Sam Smith. Sam gets 5 lines, possibly because any more than that risks them going off script and committing another ignorant faux pas.
I read an article a few months ago by Sir Ian McKellen, and he said that no openly gay man had ever won an Oscar, and if this is the case, even if it isn't the case, I wanted to...
They also come dressed in an outfit that I'm certain has George Michael on a spin cycle in his grave, accessorized with their own version of the Carrie nameplate necklace. So, production oversight, stupid Easter egg, or are we expected to believe that English pop stars in this universe consider Carrie so iconic that they're emulating her? Doesn't matter, thankfully they're gone before we have to work it out. Charlotte's main beef in the finale is another example of the show trying to paint in fine detail when all it can be trusted with is crayons. Char's return to her art dealing career is frequently undermined and interrupted by her kids, and to be fair, that is something she warned them not to do. But all we see is Charlotte's level of parental involvement going from the Brady Bunch to shameless overnight, so it's unclear who's actually in the wrong. Her new Gen Z colleagues who say things like,
Big yikes, girl!
And
You are the main character!
further complicate matters by inviting her out for celebratory drinks. They claim it's for wringing over $100,000 out of Sam Smith, but I'd just as soon pat her on the back for getting their turquoise ass off the premises. And it's during this celebration that drunk Charlotte makes a welcome reappearance, ranting about the responsibilities inherent to the life she spent the better part of 40 years chasing, and giving her phone a margarita bath. Drunk Charlotte then stages a debut performance for her family, before bringing out hungover Charlotte, who is less appreciative of her alter ego's exploits. She and Harry wrap their nothing plot for the season with a mutual agreement to share the parental load more evenly, which is fair. But by now, I would be gleefully suggesting that the real solution would be to fake their deaths and leave the kids to fend for themselves. I give it 24 hours before Rock's waving around a pig's head on a stick. Ask and ye shalt receive. After my whinging that And Just Like That wasn't doing anything real with Anthony and Giuseppe's burgeoning love affair, they try something new for the finale, which, at least initially, is more than you can say for Anthony. Following a spot of allegedly expert up the bum no babies, Anthony thinks his job is done. But Giuseppe has other ideas, and to his sexagenarian lover's horror, makes it known that he'd like to park his Big Mac truck right in that little garage. And it's a rapid descent from there into some icky toxic masculinity rubbish about him not being the woman. Stanford makes a weak attempt to imply to them all that he's a top, something which I'd bet could only be true if the word top was an acronym for taking oily pee. Now, I'm not going to explain the many ins and outs of the gay bedroom here, for I have neither the time nor the appropriate anatomical models. What I don't think is a thing is how the show paints versatility as largely the younger generation's crusade. Gen Z didn't invent the flip-flop, careful where you Google that, any more than boomers invented cruising up the Hershey Highway. We also get a final check-in on Stanford when Carrie discloses that he's staying in Japan as a Shinto monk. It's a weird way to end his story, but, and you don't hear me say this very often, I do buy it. Besides which, it is a sweet tribute to departed actor Willie Garson, allowing his character to live peacefully on while his friends raise a Cosmo in his honor. A very rare win. But that's enough schmaltz, back to the horror show. Giuseppe turns out to have taken Anthony's reluctance to accept goods via the freight entrance rather hard, evidenced by his sudden threat to move to Rome. This, arguably overdramatic reaction does force Anthony to reconsider his attitudes to same-sex gender roles, and to announce his love for Giuseppe. And leads to the pair of them making up and making out in Carrie's closet. Part of what's now starting to seem like a campaign, hell-bent on leaving DNA samples in every friend's apartment. We leave the freshly minted lovebirds back in the bedroom, where Anthony's losing what he diplomatically calls his virginity to Giuseppe's lung disturber. And if I'm reading his face correctly, hating every single second. But love is all about give and take, sometimes literally. I'm gonna get that on a throw pillow. To the surprise of nobody, Carrie's race to the finish line with Aiden encounters an entirely expected tripping hazard in the form of Wyatt. The youngest Shaw spawn puts his whole p*** into getting his dad back from New York, which translates to a cocktail of drugs and alcohol, Grand Theft Auto, and eventually crashing into a tree. At the very least, you can't accuse him of half-assing things. While this Virginian crime spree is unfolding, Aiden is obliviously committing a few crimes against himself. The night before he and Carrie move into their new apartment, he really drives home the show's revisionist belief that Carrie is a sweet angel who has never done a thing wrong. He accepts responsibility for their broken engagement, the lease on the apartment next to hers, even going so far as to imply that him being mad at her for any of her past hijinks is also a character flaw on his part. And just like that, has a real problem with how to deal with past misdeeds, to the point that it kind of feels like they genuinely think that Carrie hasn't put a foot wrong in 25 years. At no point is she allowed to learn and grow from her mistakes. She's just absolved of all of them. It's bizarre. But we don't get a chance to delve any further into that, because ex-wife Kathy calls to drop the news that Wyatt Twerp has attempted to give a tree an 80-mile-per-hour hug. Now, you might be wondering, Krusty, why do you think this is Wyatt trying to force Aiden back home? Well, listen to Aiden's description of what the little twerp did.
He got in a fight with his mom. He snuck out of the house and hitched 30 miles back to the farm. And then he got in my truck to drive back. And he hit a tree.
Now, listen to his excuse for doing it.
He said, I want to sleep at my dad's house.
Then why were you driving back, Wyatt? Why didn't you just go to sleep at the farm, Wyatt? Why is nobody else asking you these questions, Wyatt? But first, a distraction. Because the entire universe of And Just Like That seems to exist within a genie's lamp, Carrie just so happens to win a raffle prize. A private dinner at home for 16, courtesy of a Michelin-starred chef. And just when she's saying goodbye to her old apartment. What will she do, I wonder? Among the guests at this dinner ex machina are Smoke and Jackie, who Carrie has evidently forgiven for ruining her Met Gala plans and being the worst person alive, respectively. The dinner itself, despite the hype, is a new level of nouveau riche bullshit, wherein an entire table of people ooh and ah over a plate containing 2 olives and what appears to be the discharge from a farmyard medical procedure. Dessert is ruined by Carrie, who leads her guests in a twee word game where they have to announce what they'd like to let go of. Naturally, when it comes to her turn, she launches into a stupid monologue about freeing yourself from expectation in order to allow something wonderful and new to happen, which feels like slowly climbing on a roller coaster that has a history of freak accidents. After the party, Big Chunder Mountain claims its next victim. That's when we discover that manipulative tow rag and world's highest driver 2023, Wyatt Shaw, actually got his way. Aiden finally walks back into Carrie's old apartment, but only to tell her that they can't be together until Wyatt is 20. Which is, presumably, when his father expects him to be tried as an adult for whatever terrible crime he's destined to commit. The parameters of this weird arrangement are left undefined. Mr. Shaw says he doesn't want to lose Carrie, but won't come to visit her or allow her to visit him. Does that mean she's free to date other people in the meantime? Is she allowed to call or text? Wouldn't it be easier to leave Wyatt somewhere in the woods and let nature take its course? Apparently not. Besides which, it's a bit of a mystery what 5 years is supposed to fundamentally change in a 14-year-old who got strunk and f***ed a truck up a tree because his dad got a new girlfriend. But I guess the show had to do something to remove Aiden from the equation, and it was either this or have Carrie introduce him to Big's Peloton. Anyway, screw all of that. The finale marks the triumphant return of Kim Cattrall's Samantha Jones to the Sex and the City universe, courtesy of the much-trailed phone call between she and Carrie. It's 1 minute and 15 seconds of apparently extremely costly but nonetheless important work by Ms. Cattrall. Right off the bat, early reports that SJP was unaware of the cameo until its first reporting in June were probably wide of the mark. Unless the New York portion of the scene was redone in what would have to have been some pretty hasty reshoots, she had to have known that Cattrall was supposed to be on the other end of the line. Unless, of course, she doesn't understand how loudspeaker works, which, if she's anything like Carrie in real life, I'm inclined to believe.
This is for Rachel, you big, fat, white, nasty, smelling, fat bitch.
It was smart of them to have Sam appear in the first 2 minutes of the last episode, so as not to overshadow what they were trying and failing to achieve in the following 40. Because, to be honest, it was like looking through the windows of the Ritz-Carlton on your way home to a mattress behind McDonald's. Maybe it's amplified by her previous absence, but having Cattrall back, clearly having a whale of a time filming without any of the people she's been bad-mouthing for years, is a jolting reminder of what And Just Like That has been lacking: its sense of fun. Whether this results in a more substantial return is on the lower end of likely, but the very positive reaction to such a tiny cameo couldn't help but have given Kim Cattrall some serious negotiating power. Whether she does anything with it is up to her, but this show needs the kind of energy that a character like Samantha brings to the table if it's ever going to become more than what it currently is. Mind you, I might be reaching, but Carrie's face after that call ends looks to me like a little bit of SJP came out. If you listen closely, you can hear the cogs turning. This